that the reality is that it's coming at a good time of year for us down here in Southwest Florida. It's coming
Yeah, I
at
agree
a
with that.
time of the year. So it gives us time to hone our skills, so to speak. And by our winter season, everyone will have this thing down. People still want to buy property and people still want to sell.
Yep,
So
I agree with that.
we're in a
Absolutely.
desirable area. So
Yeah.
I think all in all, Christian, you've done a wonderful job in helping us prepare for this. And that the Georgia broker that you were talking about, I encourage people to play that video because he was very insightful.
Yeah, he was so great. He was wonderful to work with. So I found the video here. So the first one I want to point people to, we did a buyer brokerage agreement, why I love them and why you should too. It's a 20-minute video, just me talking, and it just kind of guides people through how you think about this stuff and how you're going to use it. And then separately, we did one, let's see where it is, the initial NAR settlement discussion, March 2024. Another really great video. That was the one we were referring to. And then, I've done a couple others since then. And you can kind of go on here and you pick anything that you think is somewhat interesting. But this one, we have a little bit more information and we've had more time to think about it. So I'm really happy to share with you some of the stuff that we're seeing now. And that starts with some of the new FAR forms. Now, unfortunately, NABOR hasn't released their updated forms just yet, and FARBAR hasn't released the updated forms just yet. I think some of this thing is getting delayed, and there's just a lot of moving parts. But it is a really wonderful opportunity because I think yesterday FAR finally released their forms. So I want to start with the sales agreement, the listing agreement. And so here's the listing agreement. It's going to look pretty much the same. You may not use a FAR listing agreement, and that's okay. This is just used to kind of guide us in kind of what you can expect on the other forms. And so what they changed a few things, but initially, you're not going to notice any major changes. Nothing's going to jump out of the page for us until you get to seller obligations. And actually, even this is pretty similar. I just always like pointing this out, and it's why I highlighted it. So under seller obligations, this is what the seller is obligating themselves to do for you and as part of your partnership. And there's also broker obligations. I think it's a little further, broker authority, and I think there might be a broker obligation somewhere in here. But I always love just going through, hey guys, this is our agreement. This is what you're going to do. This is what I'm going to do. And then if we get into the meat and potatoes of it, compensation. Mike, the big thing we saw change is they're not calling it commission, they're going to call it compensation. So we keep that in mind. They don't want people using the word commission for some reason. So if we look at compensation, again, this doesn't look a whole lot different. But what I will challenge people on, and Dad, I'm really curious of your opinion on this, how you'll present this and how you'll get your seller to agree to it. So it basically says seller will compensate broker, this is the listing broker, for procuring a buyer who is ready, willing, and able to purchase a property or any interest in the property on the terms of this agreement or on any other terms acceptable to seller. Seller will pay broker as follows. A percent of the total price, or blank, like a flat fee, no later than the date of closing, a percentage or a dollar amount for the option, percentage or dollar amount for lease, and then separately some sort of, a fee, broker fee due, like when it's due. Dad, this is pretty common, right? This is exactly how they do the listing agreements now.
It's exactly the same what we're dealing with now.
Exactly the same. Here's the difference. And I am not a fortune teller, but this is as close as I get to it. The question you're going to have to answer for yourself and for your customer is, do I put the amount that I would normally put, like say it's 4%, 5%, 6%. We're going to use, I don't even know if I'm allowed to use percentages. Let's say you're going to price it assuming that the buyer broker is going to get a fee as well, right? Let's just say that. They're going to get compensated from the listing broker's compensation. So you're going to price it kind of the way we've done it previously. And you're going to put in, we're going to put in 10%. We're going to put in we could put in 20%. I don't know. It gets a little challenging because of all the, the people that are watching. But let's say you put in a number and then you say down here, we go to 9. Compensation to a buyer's broker. Now this is the same as well. This honestly hasn't changed either, except for the fact that it's compensation. And so this is, you put one number up here, and then you're thinking about, do I put a number here? Now, the result of that NAR settlement was that on MLS, you are not going to be able to advertise what the split would be the way we do currently. So currently you might say a certain percentage and then something to the buyer broker. We're going to split it 50-50. And so on here, you're going to tell your seller, hey, this actually really helps us. We'll be able to market the property and we can encourage more buyers to come to us, knowing that their agent will be taken care of. Here now, I wonder, this is my magic ball, I wonder if it will benefit us to put a number there or just to put 0. And so hear me out on this. This is something that's kind of been different than most people have been thinking. So if we put the 50% of that amount, we're going to split it 50-50. I can't really advertise that. I could probably put it on my website. I could, anyone calls me, I could say, yeah, the seller's already agreed to give a certain percentage. And so yes, but it won't be on MLS. So if instead you put 0, and then you tell your seller, hey, we're going to put 0 here, and we will evaluate every deal as it comes up. So if a buyer comes and knocks on our door and hands us an offer, and they say, we'll give you $1 million, but we want you to pay 10% to the buyer's broker, you'll evaluate it overall, the whole thing. And it really won't matter what this listing agreement says.
I don't think it's going to make any difference at all. I mean, you and I already run into this, Christian, with title insurance. When a buyer makes an offer, I'm told this by other realtors, that the buyer generally will ask, what are my expenses? And if it's title insurance and, if there's other fees, loan fees on top of that, they will take that into consideration into how much they're willing to offer. Flip it around, you present that offer to the seller. Let's say you're the listing agent and the owner's trying to decide, do I accept this thing or not? He's going to ask, well, what are my expenses? So directly or indirectly, it's going to come out of what somebody's willing to accept or what somebody's willing to offer, just like you and I have been dealing with for forever with title insurance. People ask their fees before they make an offer or they accept. Plus, we've had other brokers say, and depending upon what the market's like, and things are slowing down a bit right now, if you want foot traffic, you might want to put something down. I fully expect selling agents will be calling listing agents before they show the property. How much are you paying?
Well, so my argument, and thank you, Dad, I appreciate that.
Sure.
My argument is, I don't think it matters what the seller is paying. And here's why. There's an old, let's see if I can release this.
Is that Windex, Christian?
Pretty much.
My big fat Greek wedding here.
All right. So, Mike, you ever bought a used car before?
Yep.
All right.
Corvette.
So there's an old trick in the used car business. They call it the 4 corners, or like the pie, or the 4 quadrants, maybe. And so you come in, Mike, and they say, well, Mike, what's your budget? What's your answer, Mike? Give me a hypothetical. How do you answer that question?
Whatever Ruth says.
Well, because I get ticked off at that question, I usually come in, I'm willing to go $100.
All right, $100 per month, is that what you're saying, or total price?
$100 max, because he should never ask me that question.
So $100 total price. So
You can't smirk while you answer, Mike.
So purchase price, Mike wants to pay $100. You know what the salesman should say to that?
He
Sure,
just walked out.
no problem, Mike. You got it. We can make that work. But here's
Interest rate
why
at 4,000%.
it literally doesn't matter what you said at all. And it's a stupid question, because what what the sales agent will do in that scenario is that they'll say, all right, $100 for the purchase price. I'm going to make your interest rate, the maximum 26% interest rate. I'm
Right,
going to make you pay me for your trade-in.
yeah, we give you $1.95 for your
And it's
trade-in.
it's gonna be a 250-year loan. You'll
All right, I'll
pay.
go to $200.
See, yeah, so ultimately what they're doing there is they're saying this doesn't matter. What the seller is paying in commissions doesn't matter. It could be 1,000, it could be 100,000, it could be 100 million. I don't really care as the seller. I don't really care as the listing agent. What the buyer needs to care about is what's in the middle. What's your true cost of ownership? And
How
a
much
buyer
my
needs to
check
answer that.
has to be,
What'd you say?
what's the actual check gonna be, whether
Yeah,
it's
what
through,
is the true cost of ownership?
yeah,
And so when I look at something like a house, we're going to use a little bit different, but you still have a purchase price. We're going to put on here, it's going to be the compensation. And then you're going to have not trade-in necessarily, but it's going to be inspections. And then here it's going to be your, I don't know, your loan, right? So if loan or cash. But you can put any number of things in there. What I care about is here. I care about what's in the middle, because outside of that, you're kind of wasting your time even worrying about it. So that's why I don't think you put a number in number 9 on that compensation to a cooperating broker. I don't think it's relevant, because if you put 10% in that number there, or you put $100 million in that number there, it really doesn't matter until you know what the purchase price is, until you know what their offer is, whether it's a cash deal or a loan deal. Is the buyer paying commission, or what if the buyer never wanted you to, pay them a commission? What if they didn't need a credit? Why
and
would
you need something before you show the property, Christian. You can't just leave it blank.
all right. Here we go.
And it has to
Sorry
be
about the up
ascertainable.
close. Woo. All right.
Uh,
So that's a good
hey.
point. And maybe other people are thinking that same question. Here's my counter to that. You need something. So let's see what forms they have. Number 1, listing form. We've got that.
Right.
Not really worried about it. Personally, I would, let's see if I can share my screen one more time.
If you're a selling agent, what number do you put in there?
If I'm the listing agent, I put nothing on line 136. I check the box, none of the above.
Okay.
Right? Because it's irrelevant to me what the buyer's agent is making. I don't care. Doesn't matter to me. There's nothing else on here I would point to. So we're gonna cancel this form right there.
Mhm.
And then we're gonna look at the exclusive buyer brokerage agreement. Separately, though, this is a form I want to jump to, because this answers your question, Dad. There has to be something, right?
Yeah, under
Well,
the settlement.
first,
Yeah.
when you work with a buyer per your NAR settlement, you
Right.
have to have this signed with the buyer ahead of
Before you
time,
show the property.
before you show the property. So you're going to go to your buyer, or the buyer comes to you and says, Don, I really want you to work with me and help me find a great house. You're like, sure, I'd
Right.
love that. That'd be great. Here's what I charge. Here's the
Right.
agreement. Sign it when you have a chance. And you're gonna fill this out. And you're gonna give it to them, right?
Right.
So that's supposed to be up front. Now, if you wait a week or 2 weeks, no one's gonna
Right.
know. Just don't tell Mike, right? Mike, you don't want to hear it, right? So you're working with someone, you're talking to someone, they're just a friend, and then all of a sudden they find a property that they want to buy, and they're like,
Right.
"That's the one I want." And so you say, "All right, let's do it. We got a couple of things we need to sign. We got to fill out our offer. So we
Right.
got our sales contract. I got to get you to sign a buyer brokerage agreement." And they say, "Well, I really want the seller to pay this commission. I know the number. I get it. I'm willing to pay you, the 30%. That's fine. I'll happily do it. But can we build that into the price?" Sure. Why not? You know how we're going to do that? Well, first, we're going to have you sign this. And on here, it's going to say compensation of broker. And right in this area, you're going to put in your number, whatever you agreed to. In my hypothetical, it was 10%. right? So the buyer agreed to pay you 10% in order to help them find a house, or her. Done. All right. So that's my agreement with the buyer. I'm
Right.
good there. I'm covered under MLS rules and the NAR settlement. And then when I make my offer, the buyer asked me to ask the seller to pay it. So this is the form that FAR has come out with that I like. It's called the
Right.
compensation agreement, seller to buyer's broker. So included in your offer, you're going to include this. You're going to say, if buyer's broker is procuring cause, seller will compensate buyer's broker as stated below the closing of the property. And you're just going to put in 10% right there, right on that line. 10% of the gross purchase price of the property, plus you don't have to put something else, but if you did, you'd put it in the next line. You could put other terms as well. You could put something else in there. I'm not sure exactly what you would add, but we'll see. They just wanted to create that opportunity. And so I take this form and I put it together with the sales contract and I submit it to the seller or to the listing agent. And I say, I'm offering $1 million but I want a 10-day inspection period. I want you to pay for the title insurance and I want you to pay my buyer broker 10%, whatever the number might be. And the seller, how would the seller respond to that, Dad? What do you think?
They're gonna look at the net, what they would get after closing.
Yeah, they're
Accordingly,
gonna look at the middle.
which
they're
is
gonna
what they
look right
do
here.
already. They already do that.
Yeah, they already do that. What's the big deal? Not a big deal. It's not a big deal. And if your price stinks, guess what? They're not going to pay 10%.
It comes
If
down to
you're-
the bottom line, how much is gonna end up in the seller's pocket, which it always has.
Right, which he's always done. There is a complication, maybe two. There are two things that I think are going to be these little obstacles we're going to have to overcome. Number one, and Chris already mentioned this in the comments, seller might just say no. You know, they may have just read something in the newspaper. I'm not paying commissions. This is ridiculous. There's a whole lawsuit, and they're going to be somewhat uninformed potentially, or they're just going to be stubborn, and the seller will simply say no, not happening. Okay, so be it, right? Here's why I don't care. Number one, if it's a cash deal, you're just going to lower your price, right? So you're going to say, and honestly, any deal, it could be a loan deal as well. So
Yeah.
instead of the $1 million plus a 10% commission, I'm going to offer $900,000 with no commission. And I'll pay my commission to the buyer broker because I already agreed to it. It's already there. So I already agreed to paying that commission. I'm just going to lower my price. You don't want to pay it? I don't care. That's fine. I'll just lower my price. You've now declined my offer. And so now I'll do a counter offer. That's all it is.
So indirectly, you are paying the commission because I'm paying you less,
Totally.
one way or another.
Yeah. So you want to be stubborn, so be it. I don't mind. The other thing will be, you know, we have to overcome these obstacles of someone who's getting a loan. Now, luckily, the conventional loans, FHA and VA, they're all adapting. Basically, you can have a buyer pay commission to their agent right on the settlement statement, and the lenders will allow it. They won't be considered closing costs necessarily. They're just going to be part of your overall deal. I don't think it's going to harm a buyer because they're calculating it differently. You know,
If the seller's paying it, the lender doesn't care.
if the seller's paying it, the lender doesn't care. And if the buyer's paying it, the lender still won't care. There will be an adjustment. You know, lenders will have to kind of learn how to process these, but it'll be okay. You know, I think it'll challenge some of those people that have a very low deposit or down payment. I could see that being a little complicated, but lenders, they're going to be ready for this. And we're just going to have to figure out exactly how it works. I would say before you make an offer, agreeing to pay commission, you're just going to make sure you're talking to a great lender. There are a lot of them in this town. We like the local lenders.
Well, you can get the local lenders on the phone. The local lenders know the property, and they're already used to this, and it's already going on, Christian.
Yeah, exactly.
The seller already pays the selling agent.
Yeah,
Lenders deal with it.
exactly. So Christina, I see that you raised your hand. I'm curious if you had a question.
So I do, thank you. So you have your buyer broker agreement, right? You agreed to 3 bananas that they're going to pay you, right?
Yeah, bananas are great. Yep.
Okay. So then you
One
go,
apple.
yeah, you make your offer, you include the 3 bananas within the offer, and they come back and they say, no, but we'll do 2 bananas. So at that point, do you hold, I mean, obviously it's a choice decision. So if you don't hold your buyers responsible for that extra banana, do you then redo that form just to say 2?
That's a wonderful question, and I love the bananas. So that's what I'm going to do from here on.
That's the
Yeah.
compensation to the
That's
just to clarify.
Vicki Douglas
Yeah.
heard that from
No,
somebody.
we're talking about bananas here. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think you would amend your buyer brokerage agreement. Or if your buyer trusts you, who cares? Right? Mike, I'm curious. We don't know exactly how this will operate. We don't know if your broker is going to be required to sign the buyer brokerage agreement, and if they're going to be matching it up. What's on the settlement statement and what's in my buyer brokerage agreement. Does it work? I think every brokerage will deal with it differently. But ultimately, if you wanted to be perfect about it, and if you had a very detail-oriented buyer, they're going to say, hey, Christina, we got to amend this buyer brokerage agreement to 2 bananas so that it works. Alternatively, what I would think will happen is your buyer's going to go and it's like, all right, I guess seller's going to give me a 2% credit towards your commission or 2 banana credit, and I'll pay the 1 banana. That's fine. But here's the second challenge. And I talked about the first challenge already, and this one put me back on track. The second challenge is people that are looking to you to negotiate. That's a challenge, right? It's something that we have to deal with every single day. When someone wants a credit, they want a discount, they're a longtime client. I had someone call me yesterday and they're like, I want the Tim, special credit. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. Okay, awesome. I will be buying bananas from here on out. So it'll be, but I think, if the better educated your buyer is up front, the less likely they are to fight you later, because they're going into it with an open mind, but with all the information, all of it. All right, thank you, Christina. That was wonderful. I think you would probably amend your buyer brokerage agreement. Someone asked, can we rewrite the buyer brokerage agreement specific to that property? You could. I wouldn't do that. That sounds like a ton of work. In fact, I think some people are planning on maybe sending a commission verification on every deal and calling every listing agent. I wouldn't do any of those things. I don't think it's sustainable. I really believe that you're going to make your offer, you're going to include the compensation or compensation agreement with it. And if the seller counters it, so be it.
Is there a protection period in that form, Christian?
There is a protection period in the form.
Or you just have a long protection period? You could have a 1-week listing and a 60-day protection period. You showed them the property, you made the offer.
Yeah, so interestingly on the protection period here, so let's see. It says here in the term that it's a 30-day term, which is actually pretty slim, right? That's I would put 90 days in there, just to protect myself. In no event shall the term extend past the termination of seller's broker's current listing of the property, including any extensions or effective protection periods. So they do reference these protection periods. It's different. And this is FAR. We'll have to wait and see what FAR and NABOR come out with.
But if you have like a 1-week listing agreement and a 90-day protection period, and you show the property, you submitted an offer, it's pretty easy to document that you were involved in that 1-week period. That would, I think, protect the realtor.
Well, and more importantly, this buyer brokerage agreement is very important. This is key because you don't want to be held to whatever the listing agent games are being played. You don't want to be held to the expiration of the listing agreement in any way. Like you don't want that risk. So you have to have this buyer brokerage agreement signed, because if the seller finds a loophole or the listing agent finds a loophole not to pay you those 3 bananas, you need to know that your buyer's got your back. That if the bananas fall apart, you can always get a peach.
And I would make sure you follow the rules on this, because the buyer would turn on you later on, or could turn on you later on just to get out of the commission.
They could
I mean,
turn on you.
You post-date something or predate something and you didn't have it signed before you show the property, and they see the amount of the commission. I know from the tax fraud work I've done, the buyers are the first to turn on you.
Yeah, exactly. Christina, I think, had another question.
Yeah, Christian, on this exclusive buyer broker agreement, can we add to it? Let's say, for example, we know eventually we're going to go show some GL homes or Lennar homes. And on average, let's say we know that there's bonuses involved. Do we have to have separate ones, or can we just add to it? If buyer goes to Lennar build, bananas would be paid at what Lennar is offering at that time, or since we have to be specific for bananas, can we add in the additional section something so we don't have to constantly be redoing this form for every single?
So I don't think so. I don't think you're going to be allowed to do that.
It has to be ascertainable when it's signed. That's in the settlement agreement.
Yeah, the buyer, if you sign this agreement and the buyer agrees to pay you 3 bananas, and then you find out through the grapevine that you could have gotten 10 bananas,
You're stuck
then,
with it.
it is what it is. The benefit, though, if we look at the silver lining, is that it will never be 0 bananas. Ever again. That's the goal, is that you are paid what your buyer agreed to pay. And anything over that goes to the buyer, goes to equity, goes to a credit, whatever it may be.
I don't
get
need
your bananas, no
stuff on the
others.
table like that, though. Honestly, I mean, I'm one of the, I guess you call stubborn people that don't go down on their commissions. I'll go up, but I won't go down. So if I'm losing fruit on the table there, I would rather have them sign for, my buyers sign for 4, explaining to them.
Yeah.
We can then alter this according to what the sellers
Yeah,
offer.
I think you could do that, Christina.
So we
That
could
would
do
be,
a notation on the form saying this. I mean,
you would
so
put
that
in here
comfortable.
additional fees, or you would put in, you'd put in a higher percentage, I don't know why they don't have the bananas line in here, but you could put 20 bananas in there and just tell your buyer, hey, trust me, if it's less than the minimum bananas would be 3.
So,
But I would not do that.
is there a line in there though, Christian, to make the buyer feel comfortable when
No,
we're asking for more?
No. There isn't.
No. So, but wait, let me finish, please. Just to say to them, if seller is offering less than the above amount, that will be the amount that is agreed to.
You'd have to add that in, but that is not, I don't think that's
I
going
think
to
you have a
happen.
problem
very
with the
often.
settlement agreement when you do that.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's one of the big terms in the settlement was that this would be agreed upon in advance. You can go down, you can't go up.
No, but that's what I'm saying. I'm
You
talking about
can.
going down.
I just don't think it's when COVID hit, my boss at the time, he wanted all of us to wear a mask and gloves. And I told him that's not sustainable. I'm not going to wear gloves at every closing for the next 10 years of my life. That's just not going to work. And he's like, no, we're all doing it. It lasted like 3 days. And there's going to be a lot of that in this industry come August. There's going to be a lot of the gloves analogy. You're gonna try things. It's not going to work. Is it sustainable? How many times are you going to have to explain that to a buyer? Now, if this buyer is your best friend and they just blindly trust you, yes, you could put 20 bananas and that would be fine. I just don't think that's sustainable. I think you're going to be, these builders are going to change their policies. There's not going to be bonuses anymore. They're going to probably violate RESPA some other way by saying like, hey, we'll invite you to Disney World for every time that you bring a buyer to us. That is going to be a different kind of bonus.
What I was specifically, I kind of switched it mid-conversation there. Let's say with our buyer-broker relationship, we're putting 4% at all
Bananas.
times.
Yeah,
At the
we're
top.
sticking to
Four
bananas.
bananas, four bananas for compensation. Underneath the other terms, am I allowed to say there that the bananas will change if the listing agent is offering less than 4 bananas to that specific amount? So going down, not up. That way you're not leaving fruit on the table. You're covering yourself ahead of time, but you're stating so the buyer is comfortable. We will go down to 2 bananas. We will go down to 1.5 bananas. Because
Yeah.
I'm in the luxury market, sometimes it switches from 2.5 to 3.
You won't care anymore. You
Mm.
won't care anymore.
I know that they've said over and over and over that buyer broker agreement, there has to be certainty. It
There has
can't
to
be
be
vague or
certainty.
open-ended, or that's what gets you in trouble.
Yeah, there's, Mike mentioned earlier in this video that, there's going to be people breaking the rules and you're going to see other people get away with it. I think that is going to be a real challenge to us, is that there are going to be agents and brokers that don't play by the rules. And eventually everyone will get on the same page, but it won't be right away. And this will be one of those things like, people be putting stuff on the documents. I heard someone say, I'm going to upload a Word document saying how much we'll pay in compensation I'm going to upload it into MLS. And I freaked out, like, don't do that. That is a huge problem. Don't do that. But there will be people doing it, and you're going to think they're getting away with it until they're not. So Christina, I don't like that one. Dad, what is your opinion?
I mean, I'm looking at the settlement agreement as we speak, and they give an example of what cannot go into the brokerage agreement. And the example they give is buyer broker compensation shall be whatever the seller is offering the buyer. It has to be ascertainable. The amount of the compensation reflected must be objectively ascertainable and may not be open-ended. E.g., buyer broker compensation shall be whatever amount the seller is offering to the buyer. And that seems what Christina is talking about.
Yeah, she's probably giving a little bit more certainty than that, which is good. I'll give you another analogy. Dad, I think I was probably 9 or 10 when that whole Napster lawsuits were going on.
Yep.
Not my dad, but certain parents were downloading music online,
I still got the hard drives, Christian.
Yeah, so in that scenario, what was happening is these class action lawyers were suing 13-year-olds. And they were doing it to prove a point. It wasn't like they were trying to get money from a 13-year-old. They were trying to make national news to freak everybody else out. Yeah. That will happen. I promise you. Just don't be the 13-year-old. And if you want to go there, you can get there eventually, maybe, but don't be the guinea pig. Well, and actually, I've given that advice a lot recently.
If you play games with what's right in the agreement, you're jeopardizing your entire commission. You don't want to do.
I've got someone else that wants to talk. I think you have to unmute yourself. Let's see if that happens. Well, we'll see if they unmute themselves. Not just yet.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Can you scroll up to number 9?
Conditional termination.
Maybe I have the wrong.
You meant this.
The listing agreement.
Listing. I think I deleted the listing agreement. Hold on.
You threw me off on one thing with, okay. I think it was number 9.
Hey, if it's only one thing, I'm doing pretty well.
Is it the name of the broker, Mike?
No.
Oh.
All right.
Okay.
Cooperation.
Yeah, the part, Christian, where you said none of the above or 0 bananas. And then I thought you said that the seller could negotiate with each offer that comes in, something to that effect. If they say 0 and offers come in, let's say you have a hot property and you're getting 10 offers from 10 different
Multiple
people.
offers. Good.
Right. As far as what the seller is willing to do, can you give a different answer to each person? Or do you have to make sure it's the same answer for each person?
You could give a different answer for each offer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
And what
think the only risk would be if you were discriminating or violating some fair housing
That's
offer.
what I was worried about.
But generally, sellers are not held to that same standard as a realtor, right? So if you're the realtor and you're not giving a certain offer because of their race or their sexuality or
Yeah.
something that's a protected class, that's a major violation. But if the seller says, I just don't like their offer, that's not on us. We just have to present the offer and the seller makes that decision. But yeah,
And-
just like, you know, it's just like the inspection period and the deposit amount and whether they're paying cash or getting a loan. You know, this is just a term of the contract.
And I recognize that with each offer, it's not just price. I mean, you've got terms that might be very relevant to whether
Yeah,
or not the deal gets
totally.
accepted.
Last
Yeah.
week, in fact, we did the video, Dad, you weren't here, price first terms. And the analogy was you can't have a low cut shirt or blouse and a short skirt. You got to pick one. That's a little teaser. You got to watch that video, Dad. That was a fun one.
I don't remember that one.
Has your wife on, Christian?
So yeah, Mike, thank you for pointing that out. You could certainly put, you know, I think, let's look at it from a different angle, all right? One of the things that has been tough for me is that people's initial reaction to this whole change in our industry is to try like heck to keep everything the same. And you really have to fight that urge. You have to adapt. This is not one of those things where it's like, well, we'll find a workaround. No, it's just different now. It's just different. It's fine. It's fine. You know, I think here's another example. This is one that I'm actually kind of excited to see if it actually works this way. And I'm glad we're putting it on video because I can look back and see if I'm right or not. Because I don't know if I'm right, but I like this. Right now, we talk about 6 bananas, and I'm going to split 3 of them with the buyer's agent. Right? That's how our listing agreements say. In fact, that's what it says right now in these updated listing agreements. I'm going to do it 50-50 and the buyer's broker gets half the bananas. And then in the other additional terms, you'll often see if I represent the buyer as well, then I'll only take 4 bananas, right? So that's a very common thing where if you're the only, you know, banana salesman, then you'll actually take less. The seller will make a little bit more and you do better. You're full for maybe 2 nights instead of 1. I think it's going to flip. Now you're going to go to your seller. That could be wrong. You're going to go to your seller and say, I charge 3 bananas. But if the buyer does not have another agent, I'm going to be doing a lot more work. And so I'm going to charge 4 bananas. Okay. I love that.
Doing twice the work.
You're doing more work. It still saves the seller some money. You're going to put it in your listing agreement ahead of time. You're just looking at it from a different angle. You're going to, instead of starting from the big bananas and going low, you're going to start from the low bananas and go big. And if the buyer doesn't have an agent, then maybe the buyer's going to ask for them to help on the commissions or not commissions, but on like closing costs, on something else. You don't know, but you want to make sure that if you're going to be doing both sides, that you're compensated properly. I don't know. We'll see if that one's right. I could be right. We'll see. All right, I got a couple of questions. Do you prefer the FAR or NABOR listing agreement when both have the changes, of course? One of the big challenges with FAR or FAR-BAR is that they have a different listing agreement for every type of broker, transactional or single or whatever it may be. The NABOR, you just click the box. So I think in that scenario, a lot of people prefer the NABOR listing agreement. I don't think it really matters. I don't really have a dog in the race in that one. The next question, does this form become attached and made part of the contract? I love this question. Thank you, Lynn. Great question. Yes, it does. Absolutely. In fact,
And that's
I'll
what
show you
earlier, weren't you, Christian? I mean,
say that.
That's what you were saying at the very beginning, that the listing agreement, the buyer brokerage agreement would be part of the offer.
Yeah,
and the seller
it has to be. And so, Dad, do you remember that lawsuit that came out recently that said, you know, that because the addendum wasn't checked as
Yes.
being a part of the
Because
contract, that it totally
the
wasn't?
integration was they signed the basic contract without the addenda, and because of the integration clause, they said that's a complete agreement. So
Yeah, so that is a big challenge, and I'm on the NABOR Forms Committee. I brought this up. I don't know if it's going to make it or not, but if you're doing a NABOR contract, let me see if I can share my screen real quick. So this is a NABOR sales contract. On the 11th page, it has this checkbox here where you can collect all the different addenda that are attached.
right.
FAR and FARBAR don't have this. So you're going to have to add it as additional terms or terms and conditions. But on NABOR, you're actually just going to check this other box. And you're going to put in here, what is that form called? Compensation agreement.
Compensation
So when you
agreement.
submit that offer, if the seller doesn't sign your compensation agreement, but they do sign the sales contract, it's not an effective contract. The challenge I would see is if the seller were to sign the sales agreement, you didn't reference the compensation agreement anywhere, and so now, like, do you have a deal or not? That one's a little tricky, but yes, I would make it. I would
You want
attach it.
something under other terms and conditions.
Yeah, you'd put it here. You'd say, you know, addenda shall include compensation agreement. Something simple. I don't think it would be, that one will be easy. Barry mentions and reminds everybody, everything is negotiable. In fact, I think it says that was one of the big things that had to be added. Here, if you look here, brokers' commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. That is something that they required to be in all these forms. Barry had another one. Stellar MLS said that they may ask to see a copy of the BBA, just FYI. Yeah, what we're going to see, I actually heard, Dad, you and I were in a seminar, and one of the brokers said that they're going to put together this like portal where you're monitoring who's signed with whom. I thought that was just ridiculous. I don't see that ever being, again, that's the COVID gloves. Again,
Yeah.
I don't think that's sustainable. That's not going to really be a thing. Not
Too much work.
Oh, Phil is on here. Hey, Phil, listing agreement is part of the contract. No, listing agreement's not part of the contract. The only time it could be complicated is in this form. They try and reference a termination or a term, and they talk about once the listing agreement terminates, then this compensation agreement may terminate with it. They do. I don't know if that is how that'll really work. I haven't spent a ton of time thinking about it. But again, as long as you have a buyer brokerage agreement signed, as long as you have a signed contract, that listing agreement will extend as long as you're under contract. And there's a protected period on top of that.
Something under other terms and conditions saying that the seller agrees to pay the compensation pursuant to the buyer broker's agreement, because the listing agreement that NABOR ultimately puts out, they usually have those terms on who pays for what in the listing agreement, and it would probably conflict with the contract. In addition to the price will conflict.
Yeah, and I think there's something in the contract that says the addenda will override what's in the contract or otherwise. So
you want to limit what provision of that will be included in the contract, which is just the compensation part.
Yeah,
not the price and not who pays for what and all that.
Yeah, you know what's the only thing I didn't really put on here is they have a separate compensation agreement, and there's a reason why I didn't do it is I don't think it makes sense to me, at least. But it's a compensation agreement. This one's called, the one we looked at is called seller to buyer's broker. They have another one that is listing broker to buyer's broker. So let's say, for example, you had the listing agreement did have that you were splitting 3 bananas with the buyer broker. I suppose in that scenario, you could have it be, you could use the listing broker to buyer broker compensation agreement. I don't know how you would know that ahead of time. There really isn't a way to know that ahead of time. All right, we got another question. So if a new builder is offering a $10,000 banana bonus in addition to compensation, but I agreed to 3 bananas. What happens to that $10,000 banana bonus? Can I write in the event there's a bonus that is acceptable to receive? We really don't think so. I wouldn't be the first one to try it. How about that? I wouldn't be going out day one, putting in my buyer brokerage agreement that, if there's additional bananas available, I get to eat them. I don't think that that's going to help you, and it makes you a target. But if you do put it in there, just realize that it hasn't been tested. That's not something that we know where the pushback will be. I honestly believe that the big builders in this country are not going to be able to offer bonus stuff.
Yeah,
Period.
it's not ascertainable. I think it violates the agreement. I mean,
I don't think, and builders, they're going to have to motivate. They're not going to have to motivate buyer brokers to do it anymore. That's not going to be the thing. That's not a tool in their toolbox anymore.
They'll come up with some way to get traffic in their new project.
Julia says, are you saying that if a purchase agreement doesn't reference a fully executed addendum, it is not part of the contract? Dad, you want to take that one?
If there's an integration clause basically says that you have enough, all the material terms are agreed to, that there's nothing extraneous to the agreement. If all the material terms are agreed to, you have a contract. And I think that case we had involved pre-closing occupancy addendum and some other addendum they were not signed, but the main body of the contract was signed, and they didn't check the blocks. So the integration clause in the contract says this is the complete agreement of the parties and there's nothing else. And the courts determined that is a complete agreement. So the fact that the seller did not sign those other addenda didn't help the buyer at all.
Dad, do you remember what that addenda was?
One of them was a pre-closing occupancy. I forget what the second one was.
Yeah, so in that scenario, the buyer was expecting that extra addenda to be included, and the seller just kind of changed their mind and like, no, we're not doing that. And so the buyer sues, and ultimately the seller won because that wasn't marked as part of the contract.
And it might have been the other way around, Christian. It might have been
maybe it was post-closing occupancy.
But it's definitely to do with occupancy, and somebody was really ticked. I forget whether it was the seller or the buyer, that they didn't have the right to stay or move in early.
Yeah, Barry, you had a question. What's going on?
Hey, so you're doing a great job with wonderful ideas here, and
Thank you.
some of them are in line with what we're considering ourselves as well. Something to keep in mind. One of the reasons I believe that we're in this, and I won't use the word predicament, because I remember the first house I sold here back in 2013. I made the buyer sign a buyer broker agreement, and I thought it was like a common sense thing to do. And, I think we should all be doing it. Now, as regards new construction, or if there's something else on the table, the reason that we're here is public perception, like that we don't really represent or do a good job for the people that we serve, the customer. Let that be a seller, let that be a buyer. And I think we have lost sight of that, and we need to get back to doing the right thing. On my suggestion is for people on the buyer broker agreement is to put in a number that they're comfortable with, that they want to work with, and move on. Now, if more is being offered, that'd be from a seller of a resale property or new construction home, I think it's our job to negotiate the best possible deal for that buyer. Like, that's what they're hiring us to do.
They're hiring you. Yeah.
So that's I think that's, we need to stop focusing on our self-interest and do a little bit more for the consumer. And I think at the end of the day, it'll all work out well, and there'll be plenty of bananas for everyone.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Barry. I think that's beautiful. I actually did a video on that, and I think we called it, Mike, what did we call it? Be a Better Realtor. I couldn't agree with you more, Barry. There it is. Be a Better Realtor. It was 2 weeks ago. I think that's what this whole thing was about, is we all just have to step up our game, be better educated, better educate our clients or customers, and go from there. Mike, any other words of wisdom for us?
Well, when you drill down from this whole NAR settlement thing, there's two things that really jump out. One, we're going to have to get better at defining our value, which shouldn't be that hard to do. And the second item is you're going to have to get used to negotiating your commission. And I think that's really what they wanted. They wanted the buyer maybe to have more, more be a part of the negotiating process. So I think that a lot of this is good. And why it's uncomfortable to some is because they haven't done it before.
Yeah.
But you'll get used to it very quickly. The sky's not falling. And frankly, and this has not been pointed out today, it's happening this change is happening at a time where the market's very soft. If it was a red hot market, it'd be an entirely different animal. But this is a soft market where a lot of sellers want more eyeballs on their property because it hadn't sold. So I think the time of the year is good for this change, and the kind of market we're in right now is good for this change.
Love it. Very cool. One thing I will tell people, if you go on our website, we have a fee calculator and you can do seller net sheets. It's a really wonderful tool, and it can really help explain some of this stuff to a seller who's trying to understand, well, what's the difference if I pay 1% or 2%? So you can log into this, you can see it on our screen, and you can do it. You don't even need to log in, but if you do log in, let's see if it goes in. I'll show you. There's seller net sheets. So you can do an estimate seller net sheet or sell to net. And you can even do multiple offer. And you can put together what all those different offers are and what the pluses and minuses of each are. You just have to log in and create a username. It's pretty cool. We've kind of perfected it over the years. So I would highly recommend if you're struggling with how to share some of that with a buyer or a seller, go ahead, take a look at that. It's really great. That's great. Awesome. Thank you guys for sticking around. I hope that was helpful. If you want to watch any of the previous videos, it's youtube.com/Christian Ross. And I've got probably, I don't know, 100 different videos on there at this point. And most of them have Mike's big face on them. So yeah, 151 videos. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. There's a lot on there.
Oh.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Dad.